So you think your partner is yours? You're one and only. Exclusively, completely, legally yours. Cute. Because 50,000 years ago that word, yours, did not exist. Your partner was not your partner. Your wife was not your wife. She was, for lack of a better word, a community resource. And before you get upset about that, understand that so were you. Nobody owned anybody. Nobody belonged to anybody. And if you had tried to explain the concept of she is mine and only mine to an ancient human, they would have looked at you the same way you look at someone who tries to claim ownership of the air. Just completely confused. Now let's talk about how we actually know this. Because this is not just theory. This is anthropology, biology, genetics, and archaeology all pointing in the same direction at the same time, which in science almost never happens. For 98% of our entire existence on this planet, we were hunter-gatherers. Small bands of people, maybe 20 to 50 in a group, moving constantly across landscapes, hunting what they could find and gathering everything else. No houses, no fields, no accumulated wealth of any kind. Everything was shared because sharing was survival. Your food was the group's food. Your shelter was the group's shelter. Your children were raised by the group, not just by you, because a mother alone hunting and nursing and building and navigating was a mother who was going to struggle. The whole system was built on communal everything. And here is the thing about a system built on communal everything. It does not make exceptions for sex. Anthropologist Christopher Ryan spent years digging into exactly this question and wrote an entire book about it. His conclusion, backed by anatomy and anthropological studies of hunter-gatherer communities that still exist today, was that ancient humans were not monogamous. They were what scientists carefully call multi-partner, which is a very academic way of saying that your ancient great-great-great-grandmother had options and she used them. And nobody in the group thought anything of it because the group itself was the family. Every man in the group had some reason to care about every child in the group because, statistically, with the way things worked, that child might be his. This is where it gets interesting, because this arrangement, chaotic as it sounds to modern ears, actually had a very specific social function. When paternity is uncertain, when any man in the group could potentially be the father of any child, every man has an investment in every child's survival. Nobody is indifferent to the children around them. Nobody walks past a struggling child and thinks, not my problem. Because it might be your problem. It might be your blood. The uncertainty itself created a kind of collective parental responsibility that kept children alive in a world where children desperately needed every advantage they could get. Charity, as you might say, began at home. Specifically, at everyone's home. Now here's where the biology gets uncomfortable. The human body, when you study it properly, does not look like the body of a species that evolved for strict lifelong monogamy. Without going into unnecessary detail, researchers who study human anatomy compared to other primates have found specific characteristics that only really make evolutionary sense if females historically had more than one partner regularly. The body was essentially built for a world where exclusivity was not the default. Nature, completely unbothered, designed us for something our modern culture spends enormous energy trying to override. And then, just to make things even more interesting, a study from the University of Waterloo found that one of the main things that started pushing ancient humans toward more exclusive partnerships was not love, not romance, not two people looking at each other across a fire and feeling something profound. It was sexually transmitted infections. As communities grew larger, as those small bands of 20 people started becoming settlements of hundreds, diseases that had been manageable in small promiscuous groups started spreading much faster. The communities where people started practicing something closer to exclusive partnerships got sick less often, they survived better, had more children, and slowly, across generations, that behavior spread through the population the same way any useful trait spreads, because the people who had it lived longer. So if you want to thank something for the modern relationship as you know it, you might want to send a small card to ancient disease. It did more for monogamy than romance ever did, but the real killing blow to the ancient way of doing things, the moment that changed everything permanently, was agriculture. About 10,000 years ago, humans stopped moving and started farming. And farming created something that had never existed before in the entire history of our species. Property. Real, accumulated, valuable property. Fields that took years to clear and plant. Livestock that took generations to breed. Grain stores that represented months of labor. Things worth owning, things worth protecting, and most importantly, things worth passing on to the next generation, which immediately created a problem that nobody had ever had to think about before. How do you know which child is yours? A woman always knows. She was there for every step of the process. But a man in a community where partnerships had always been fluid? He had absolutely no way of knowing. Any child around him could be his or could not be. And in a world where you now had property to pass down, that uncertainty was suddenly very expensive. So men, gradually and systematically, started solving that problem the only way available to them. They started controlling women, where they went, who they saw, who they spent time with. They wrapped it in ceremony, in religion, in law, in social expectation, and they called it marriage. They made faithfulness a virtue and unfaithfulness a sin, and they enforced those ideas with everything from social shaming to actual violence. And the woman who had once moved freely through the world, who had been a full participant in community life for hundreds of thousands of years, slowly found herself defined by her relationship to one man, belonging to one man, expected to be completely faithful to one man. While that same man, in most ancient and not so ancient cultures, was absolutely allowed to have as many partners as he could manage. Your wife was the community's wife until men invented property. And then, suddenly, she was just his. And the community had nothing to say about it anymore. That is where the word marriage actually comes from. The Latin word maritus, meaning husband, which itself came from a word that also meant lord. Not partner, not equal, not the person you choose freely and love deeply. Lord. And we built an entire global industry around it. The dress, the flowers, the cake, the ring that cost 3 months' salary because someone in the 20th century decided that was normal. All of it sitting on top of a foundation that was originally just one man's solution to an inheritance problem. Now, none of this means love is not real. Pair bonding is real. The feeling of wanting to be with one specific person, of building something with them, of choosing them every day, that is real, and it is biological, and it is genuinely one of the most human things about us. Scientists have found evidence of long-term partnerships going back millions of years in some of our earliest ancestors. But strict lifelong sexual exclusivity, the idea that one person belongs completely and only to another person forever with no exceptions and no flexibility, the kind of arrangement that fills divorce courts and fuels entire therapy industries, that is brand new. For most of our existence on this planet, your partner was never just yours. They belonged, in one way or another, to everyone. And somewhere along the way, we decided to call that a problem instead of what it actually was.